Wales versus England. Probably one of the fiercest rivalries in international rugby. A game every year in the Six Nations where both teams manage to step up that one extra level. As two nations sit watching their TVs at home, knowing no matter if you're wearing a red jersey or a white one, this game will be an edge of your seat, full-on aggression, tight-knit affair, full of highs and lows, once in a tournament moments that will be featured on that Six Nations DVD you get your dad for Christmas, and finally comments of a controversial ref making biased calls against whichever team loses. And the 2021 Six Nations was set to be no different. Coming into this game, both teams still had a lot to prove. After Wales's disastrous Six Nations last year and an average Autumn Nations Cup, they appear to have bounced back, getting 2 wins from 2 with a much tighter defence and some new beacons of hope in attack. But ultimately scraping by both wins within a score of the opposition, who in both games only had 14 men on the pitch due to almost identical red card situations. For England, riding high off a Six Nations win last year, courtesy of France deciding to play properly against Ireland, and an Autumn Nations Cup win that wasn't without its own levels of controversial refereeing, England find themselves in an unusual position. A dominant performance by Scotland saw them lose at home in Twickenham, and a win against Italy that, although looks good on paper, began to shine light on key players not really playing at their best. So both teams had something to prove. Can Wales win a game against a solid 15-man squad for the full 80 minutes? And could England have key players get back to the top of their game and maintain their discipline? With the joy of hindsight, we now know the answers to be yes and no respectively. So the big question is, did Wales win this game or did England lose it? And while it might sound exactly the same, and I could spend hours breaking down every player and every event that happened in this game, like I did for the Autumn Nations Cup final, I feel the game can be broken down into 4 key fundamentals that decided the outcome of this game: momentum, discipline, controversy, and opportunity. Momentum in this game was pretty hard to come by. Normally one team will dominate for the majority of the game, or a pendulum effect will occur between the teams taking turns in charge. But this game really struggled to get underway. The first 20 minutes especially had very little to talk about in terms of running play. There was a lot of kicking, defences were strong, and a strict referee meant penalties were thick and fast, really slowing down the game. Momentum is normally generated by pressure, and pressure has been one of the leading factors in winning for England in the past. But coming into this Six Nations, Wales have developed a new form of defence designed to absorb pressure attack. It's sort of like a half blitz defence with a smidge of diagonal. Now, that's not a very catchy name, so for now I'll call it the Bishop Blitz Defence. The premise is relatively simple. When the opponents take the ball from the ruck, the Wales defensive line sets and moves forward like a blitz defence, except at a half speed. Rather than bursting forward to go man on man, they more jog forwards but ultimately make it to the game line. As the ball moves across, the defensive line moves diagonally with it, like a bishop in chess, and can even lead to the man-on-man defence switching target depending how far they move up the field. The half speed means they are fast enough to close down the space, stopping the attacker from gaining momentum to take metres in the tackle, but also slow enough that the attacker isn't comfortable kicking over the top of you like the normal counter to a blitz defence, because the defenders will beat you back to the ball, and all the while conserving energy by jogging rather than sprinting. And while this defence has worked so far, the biggest strength comes from playing man-on-man defence. And so far, both teams they have played, being Ireland and Scotland, have ended up with 14 men. And with a man down, it's much harder to be risky in attack. and they are much more likely to play man on man and just look for an offload if the chance arises. So the Wales defence has worked well, but the flaw comes when broken play occurs. As soon as the line is broken, it can really open the floodgates, and we certainly saw it in this game. Ben Youngs and Henry Slade being the two standout players, finding the gaps and sending Wales into panic mode. But for the majority of the game, Wales were able to deal with the pressure relatively well, shutting down the England attack, stopping the ability to make ground with ease, becoming a nuisance, and thus forcing England to become more erratic and desperate, moving us on to discipline. Now, you don't have to be a rugby aficionado to know that England's team had some poor discipline in this game. The final tally, 14 penalties for England and 9 for Wales. Now, this isn't unusually high numbers for a game of rugby, but it's the cause and effect that changed this game. In the first half, both teams were penalised 7 times. The differences are that Wales, in almost every case, are penalised for not rolling away, and a lot of the times it's done on purpose to slow down the England attacking game, almost like it's part of the actual game plan. Whereas England are guilty of a variety of things, most of which completely avoidable, meaning players just aren't playing well. And the second difference is that penalties by England either directly lead to points for Wales or lead to another penalty that leads to points for Wales. In the first 20 minutes of the game, Wales actually do very little. They simply play rugby. There's nothing too flashy, going through the phases and looking solid defensively. But England give all the penalties away. First, Johnny May on attack inside the Wales half gets penalised for rolling forward with the ball after the tackle. Wales kick and move further up the field out of their half. At the line-out, Wales take the ball and pass to Hardy when Itoje is penalised for knocking the ball forwards out of his hands. This allows Wales to kick to 10 metres from the England try line. At that line-out, Itoje is penalised for entering at the side of the maul and Wales kick for 3. So in the space of 3 minutes, Wales have gone from being on the defensive in their own half to an easy 3-0 lead, and Wales haven't actually needed to do anything. This happens throughout the game, where Wales have one-off penalties for slowing down the ball, and a couple happen to be in range for Farrell to score 3, whereas England actually end up being the reason their own attack breaks down and often subsequently actually give Wales points with little to no work. Itoje is the obvious man to point the finger at in this game, with 5 of the 14 penalties coming from him alone. It's no wonder people think he had a really bad game. When in actuality, this is how Itoje plays all the time, a very talented player who always pushes the limit of the law. But the difference in this game is he actually gets caught for being just that bit too greedy. It's sort of like stealing a pound rather than a £20 note. The illegal things are much less likely to be spotted if you don't get greedy. The discipline comes in when you have multiple penalties against you, and you should realise the referee is now watching you, and you need to adjust your game accordingly. The problem is he doesn't, and as such gets pinged more and more as the game goes on. Other players for England also performed infringements that simply weren't necessary, like Ellis Genge sealing off the ball 2 minutes after coming on, Robson obstructing Zammit even though he was never going to get to the ball, or Tom Curry blatantly entering at the side of the ruck when the opportunity to clear out properly was there. But these are clear penalties, a player doing something on purpose, whereas Maro Itoje is penalised a lot in this game for some pretty 50-50 calls. But for the sheer number of times he's picked up in this game, it casts a shadow over the faults of others. But they are infringements that I reckon in another game wouldn't actually get blown up. But in this game, England found themselves on the wrong side of the 50-50 calls, which is where we come on to controversy. This game has already been saturated in controversy. People online talking about ref being biased towards one side is nothing new in the world of rugby, but this game did have some really unique grey areas of rugby that I think it's worth talking about and how they came about. So the Josh Adams try came from a rather unusual set of circumstances that I think you need to dissect to understand it properly. So the try actually begins long before Josh Adams crosses over the line, all the way back at the 13-minute mark. Wales have a line out, it is successful and gets back to Hardy. Itoje does well and makes a pressure tackle, but in the tackle gets a little bit greedy and rips the ball when on the ground. Now, at 13 minutes in, England have conceded 4 penalties in quick succession, and all for different things, all of which stopping the game and result in slow ball. It is obvious that the ref wants to allow fast, free-flowing rugby. Most of the 50-50 calls that go against Itoje are infringements that purposefully slow down the attack, rather than a legitimate contest for the ball. And this is what Pascal is looking for. Again, discipline needed to adjust to how the referee wants to play. Itoje rips the ball and Wales are awarded a penalty. They kick upfield, but it's stolen well by Johnny Hill in the line-out, but under some pressure, Ben Youngs can only box kick to pretty much where the original line-out was. This one is more successful for Wales, and the ball makes its way along to George North, who is tackled by Farrell, and Farrell is penalised for not rolling away in the tackle. Again, slowing down the play. Now 5 penalties. Pascal says to have a word with the team. The clock is stopped for 35 seconds before the clock is put back on, and Biggar makes a lovely weighted kick across to Josh Adams for the try. And there's a couple of key things to consider. While I still think this is relatively poor officiating, and had it happened to Wales, I probably would have broken my TV. When you break down the sequence from the view of Pascal, I sort of see how it came about. England up to this point at 15 minutes have caused 5 penalties, all slowing down the speed of the game, including the one Farrell has been found guilty of and told to inform the team to stop. The England team huddle, and the clock is stopped solely for the message to be delivered. The whole team is huddled. Pascal makes the mark and watches the huddle. While waiting, 5 players break away from the huddle. Therefore, in Pascal's mind, the message has been delivered, and as such, time can be turned back on, as the only reason it was stopped in the first place was for Farrell to pass on the message. Time is turned on, and Dan Biggar moves us into the final point of this game: opportunity. Now, people look at this crossfield kick and feel the referee gave Wales a huge advantage, but a lot of this comes down to Wales taking opportunities when they arise. So far in the tournament, Wales have won 2 games from 2, even though they've spent the smallest length of time in the opposition's 22 and the least visits. They make every visit count. At the point of time being turned back on, no call is made as to what Wales will do with the penalty, and I assumed watching live, like everyone on that pitch assumed, from directly in front of the post, Wales would take the easy 3, but the opportunity arose and Dan Biggar took it. For anyone who has ever played rugby, you will have been told by a coach to always be ready for the quick penalty and to never turn your back on the ball. And while the complaints from England were justified, Wales played what was in front of them and took the opportunity. An opportunity they wouldn't have even had the discipline from England not given them the penalty 3 minutes ago that led them right here. This opportunity grasping extends itself again later for Hardy's try, an utterly pointless lack of discipline from Johnny Hill. I want to say counter-rucking, because I'm not even sure what he was trying to make it look like, gives an easy penalty to Wales, even though they weren't making ground. And Hardy takes the opportunity given to take the tap and go. It's not even effort. Even after the Josh Adams try, England England still haven't adapted to the fast pace of the game. Just look at Elliot Daly, literally turned away from the ball for no reason, assuming the 3 points is coming. It's Rugby 101. Never turn your back on the ball, and Hardy makes a brilliant play, spotting Daly isn't watching and completes a superb try. Speaking of Daly, another factor is the opportunity being missed by Eddie Jones. England get doubly punished in this game. While some of the officials' calls are rightfully up for controversy, some of the England players themselves became the downfall. In a video before the game, I picked my team selection for both teams, and in it, key players I mentioned have become a hindrance to England and needed to prove themselves in this game. Owen Farrell's kicking percentage, while better, was still not great. Johnny May felt like he had fewer attacks than Mako Vunipola wore pairs of boots during the game. George Ford wasting attacks with kicks to just nothing, and one of which being Elliot Daly. England haven't performed well in this tournament so far, and part of it is Eddie Jones not taking the opportunity to change his team. In this game, the Wales defensive line held out for so much of the game, but there were flares of England attack. Ben Youngs makes a great show-and-go try, Slade finding room in the Wales defence, but in so many of their attacking runs, there's one man at the end of all of them. And as soon as it gets to Elliot Daly, it all goes wrong. And at no point has Eddie Jones taken the opportunity to fix this. How many more attacks would England have had if there was a different fullback with better handling? Would a different fullback have kept his eyes on Hardy rather than turning away? Would a different fullback have held a better line rather than miss everything and just watch the ball go past him in the Liam Williams try? Opportunities need to be taken, and Wales certainly did better at it in this game. There were other controversial moments in this game, like the Liam Williams try that Zammit best summed up for all of us in a red shirt with a single look, which in all honesty I can see arguments on both sides for. The ball loses control and goes forward, so the argument for a knock-on is absolutely valid, but the ball left his hand and immediately hit his leg, so it could be classed as just a really bad kick, and then Slade knees it backwards. I'm sure a decision around grey areas like that will now be clarified because this incident happened, but you can only play what's in front of you, and a referee, 2 assistant referees and a TMO came to a conclusion. You have to accept it. But I understand how England feel hard done by with that one. One controversial area I haven't heard a lot about is the Anthony Watson try in the third visit England got into the Wales 22 in the first 35 minutes. That's right, they only had hands on the ball in the 22 3 times. Once here at the charge down, the second here from Sinclair, and now the line-out being the third time. England win the line-out and move the ball along well and get an advantage for North not rolling away. Youngs plays well and gets the ball out quickly to Jamie George, who gives it to Watson to put a great step on Liam Williams and gets the try. But watching the replay, we can see that the grass is cut into 5-metre strips of lighter and darker coloured grass. Jamie George passes the ball on the edge of the dark grass about 10 metres out, and Anthony Watson catches the ball halfway into the light coloured grass, so the ball actually travels about 2.5 metres forwards and it isn't picked up on, even with the touch judge right there. The ball even actually leaves Jamie George's hands completely forwards, but not a lot of people have brought it up because of the overshadowing controversy around the Wales tries. They did have an advantage though from George North, so maybe the penalty could have still led to the try, but I feel a bit more sorry for James Lowe, who had this try disallowed for a forward pass, but Watson was able to score this one. Of course, I've brushed over an awful lot in this game at just how many positives there were for the Wales side in this game. I could easily spend hours dissecting everything, but I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter. The Wales defensive line looked incredibly organised for large portions of the game, and some standout defenders in North and Zammit really excelled in broken play defence. Both Dan Biggar and Sheedy greatly improved their kicking games, with a 100% kicking ratio between them both, over 8 kicks, taking the points when they were available and taking the opportunities. And it is so nice that we could have such an exciting edge of your seat games. These are the sorts of games that made us fall in love with rugby. Two rivals battling it out, each with a counter for the other's plan, moments of ingenuity from Biggar for the crossfield kick, only for Ben Youngs to dummy pass and score a try to draw it level. And to have moments that can literally make you stand up as you watch it, seeing Zammit chasing the kick of Sheedy after the interception and watching a foot race between the fastest guys on the pitch, no matter who you support, those are the moments we remember as a rugby lover. But in all honesty, Wales won this game without needing to do an awful lot. They had a game plan and stuck to it, did the basics well, held their discipline when they needed to, and took the opportunities when they arrived, while England dug themselves into more and more trouble. And while sparks of an England attack that used to exist still linger, discipline cost them the game. So to go back to my original question, to me, Wales won this game by taking the opportunities, but England lost this game by giving the opportunities to Wales. England move into round 4 of a pretty bad Six Nations, and Wales will move on to Italy to keep the Grand Slam alive. What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who's watched this and everyone that subscribed to the channel recently. The Six Nations has been a real boost for the channel. I'm so glad people are enjoying watching these videos. This one in particular had been a very different sort of video for me, trying to merge my rugby videos with my film review video that I did by having some interesting visuals, but it does take a huge amount of time to put it all together and make sure it all looks good for you guys. It is also my first sort of attempt to try and do a bit of animation with some of the arrows and stuff, so please go easy on me down in the comments, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to drop it a like and make sure you subscribe to the channel just to keep up to date with all the latest rugby videos as they come out. I hope you all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you next time. Bye bye.